How did a failed tunnel turn into a forgotten tube line before eventually becoming the highest frequency section of the London Overground? The answer is... oh, it's not here actually, I need to go and get on the train. Welcome back to Journey of the Month, the show where I go behind the scenes of London's transport network. On today's episode, I am taking the Windrush line from West Croydon all the way up to Highbury and Islington. Along the way, I'll
audition for the next Jurassic Park, disapprove of the keto diet, and talk about like 5 different disused stations. It must be a record for the series.
We start at West Croydon station, where train, tram and bus all meet. It's very similar in that way to Amsterdam Centraal, except there's no ferry. Or water. And yet a ferry gave the line its name. In 1948, the Empire Windrush carried migrants from the Caribbean who came to Britain to help rebuild the country after the Second World War. Today, Croydon hosts one of the strongest Afro-Caribbean communities in the UK, and the Windrush also passes through other hubs like Dalston and Peckham. If you're interested, by the way, the Windrush ship was named after the River Windrush in the Chilterns, which is a tributary of the Thames, which means that today, the Windrush line carries Windrush descendants underwater from the River Windrush. Neat!
Heading north out of West Croydon, we pass the ginormous Selhurst Depot, the largest train maintenance depot in the UK. No overground trains sleep there, so we're heading on to
Norwood Junction, one of the closest stations to Crystal Palace FC. In fact, the Windrush line passes within a mile of 2 Premier League grounds, the other being the home of Arsenal, and since the line was renamed, between them they've won a domestic league, a domestic cup, and a European Cup. It's a good job it was called the Windrush and not the Lose-drush. Just round the corner from the station is the site of a piece of niche railway history, an atmospheric railway of the 1840s. The train sat on top of a pipe with the air pumped out of it. A piston came down from the carriage, and the pressure of the air behind the piston pushed the train forward. Unfortunately, this meant that the pipe needed a gap for the piston to get in without compromising the vacuum in the tube. This was solved using greased leather flaps, a phrase I never thought I'd say, which had a tendency to freeze, shrink, split, and just generally not maintain a seal. Now you can still take a ride on atmospheric railways today, like the Settle Carlisle line in the north of England. It's just the word atmospheric has a different meaning. The core technology may have failed, but it brought the world's first rail flyover right here in Norwood. Today you travel over and under a bunch of them just getting between West Croydon and here. Heading north through Annerley, I'm now at Penge West. A short walk away is Penge East station on South Eastern's route towards Brunel. But there was once just the one Penge on this site, which opened in 1839 and closed just 2 years later. You can still see one of the original entrances from those days on the High Street underneath the rail bridge. It's also very close to Crystal Palace Park here and its dinosaurs. There's something bugging me about them though. Oh yeah, okay, so real dinosaurs never got to go on the Overground. It's a real shame. Sydenham has a very rare staggered platform layout. The whole station used to be sited south of the main road. The continental drift around here must be crazy. Or the construction of the branch line to Crystal Palace required the resiting of the southbound platform, and then the failing retaining wall necessitated the northbound platform's rebuild a century later. It's one of those. I reckon, and this is conjecture, that these houses opposite the station building left no room for a platform, which is why the whole thing had to be moved a little way to the north. Speeding past Forest Hill, I've always wondered something about Honour Oak Park. What happened to the U in Honour? The answer is less interesting than you might expect. Man, I need to get better at video hooks. The Honour Oak is this, or more specifically this tree's predecessor atop One Tree Hill. It marks the boundary of the Norman Honour of Gloucester, a former feudal estate. Coincidentally, Elizabeth I is said to have once picnicked here, and even more speculatively, Boudicca apparently got defeated by the Romans here. But what of the defeat of the letter U? Well, at the time it got its name, English spellings were notoriously unstandardised, which means at some point it was spelled without a U, that name ended up on a map somewhere, and the spelling stuck. God, I love a tangent. Broccoli. I spoke a bit about New Cross Gate on my episode about the Baker Loop, but it's worth repeating some key points, because this marks a bit of a boundary of sorts. So far we've been mainly travelling on the Brighton Main Line, and you'll have seen trains whiz by on the fast lines to and from London Bridge. Now we're joining the converted East London line, formerly of the London Underground. Hopefully one day New Cross Gate will become an underground station again with the Bakerloo extension, but what's the East London line all about anyway? Picture the scene. A recent technological advancement is attracting huge investment and press attention. It requires vast infrastructural development with large demands on water and energy. Lots of companies are promising the world only to never deliver. Sound familiar? Yes, it's the railway mania of the 1840s. At this point, everyone and their dog was trying to build a railway as separate commercial endeavours. With no unifying plan, the network was often piecemeal, reacting to what was already there. But by the 1860s, a consortium of 6 of these companies decided that they wanted to link their lines north and south of the Thames. Oh, and you say there's a lot of lovely little docks on the route between those points? Well, we can serve those too, why not? So they did. The consortium's new East London Railway Company built a route through, of all places, East London. Surrey Quays here initially opened as Deptford Road before changing its name to Surrey Docks. It eventually got its current name to mirror the nearby shopping centre. Today, the station is being upgraded with a new ticket hall and better accessibility. Canada Water Station came much later. After the docks ceased operation in 1969, most were filled in and the area was redeveloped. Eventually, the Jubilee Line extension would come through here on its way to Stratford, and a connection with the East London Line was established at the same time, built around the existing Victorian tunnels. The station opened in 1999, but let's come back to those Victorian tunnels, because the East London's biggest obstacle and greatest opportunity lay a short way to the north. There's a lot of history in Rotherhithe. This is where the Mayflower initially set sail on its voyage carrying the first pilgrims to New England, and where 200 years later the Brunels constructed the world's first tunnel under a navigable river. Now, I've covered this before on my channel, but the main thing you need to know in the context of today's Windrush line is that the tunnel was not successful. An engineering feat that would become the forebear for the tunnels of the Tube and systems worldwide, yes, but that doesn't pay the bills. The Thames Tunnel never managed to build the ramps necessary for vehicles like horse-drawn carriages to use it, so whilst it started out as a popular tourist attraction for pedestrians, over the years it had become quite a seedy place. This was mightily convenient for the East London Railway, who had a pre-built means of crossing the Thames, and the owners of the tunnel had a motive for selling up, and so it was converted for use by the East London's trains. Wapping Station was built inside a repurposed access shaft for the tunnels, which you can really tell if you take the stairs down inside this giant cylindrical void. There's also the best view of the tunnels from down here, if you count 2 dark portals as a view. The East London was built in stages, with the portion from here to New Cross Gate opening in 1869. 7 years later, the stretch up to Shoreditch was opened, including a connection with the main lines coming out of Liverpool Street. Sort of. By the time the District and Metropolitan Railway started running services over the East London in 1884, the Underground as a cohesive brand did not yet exist. They used a section of track that curved off to the north of Shadwell Station, connecting with what we now call the District and Hammersmith and City lines. That stretch of track was called St Mary's Curve, and it ended just behind me here at a long disused station also called St Mary's, a short walk from Whitechapel. There's nothing here to tell you that there was ever a station on this site, apart from me, of course. And I'm not going to stand here forever. In 1933, the East London came under the wing of the newly formed London Transport brand, the precursor to TfL, as a sort of subsection of the Metropolitan line. But within 6 years, St Mary's Curve had closed to passenger traffic, and the East London line was severed from the rest of the Met. But at least there were still the connections to the main lines, right? Yeah. To get onto the Great Eastern Main Line, trains had to come into Liverpool Street and then reverse back out. There was never a connection established directly out to East Anglia. This pretty much hampered the line's viability as a through route for freight. Even that link to Liverpool Street was severed in 1966, and as mentioned, the docks en route closed in the late 60s. The whole thing's raison d'être, s'amenuiser avec le temps. And yet it lingered on. By 1990, it had finally shaken off the Metropolitan's maniacal grasp, at least in terms of identity on the map. It was undeniably the Underground's 12th line, with a fresh orange colour all of its own. At that time, you could come here to Whitechapel and reel off an incredibly mundane fact. This is one of many places where the Underground goes underneath the Underground. It's boring now, everybody knows today's version. East London Orange was a slightly lighter, softer version than the shade we know today. I enjoy the fact that at the stations between here and Rotherhithe, you can still see the lighter shade atop the panelling on the platforms. Whitechapel acted a lot like a terminus in the East London days, although there was one more stop further north. It remains the Underground's most recently closed station, which means I've got to walk there. The 17 years between turning orange and closure was still rather disruptive for the East London. The whole line closed for 3 years in the 90s for refurbishment and maintenance, with the station I'm heading to now reopening 6 months later than the rest of the line. Well, here's where it isn't anymore. Shoreditch Station was shackled as soon as the Liverpool Street connection was cut, and by the time it was shuttered, services were reduced to peak hours and on Sundays for the Brick Lane market nearby. By 2006, it was history, because the future was speeding into view fast. I said the future was speeding into view fast. Oh, okay, we're going to do this in the edit. Because the future was speeding into view fast. Wow, what great timing! The East London line had always been a bit limited, so there'd been proposals for how to fix that for a while. Maybe a light railway like the DLR. Maybe that Liverpool Street connection should just be re-established. I mean, you know what happened, it became part of the London Overground. But where would it even extend to? Well, it would be really helpful if somebody had left a rail viaduct lying around. Oh look! Once upon a time, a major rail terminus called Broad Street sat on this site next to Liverpool Street Station, but nothing remains today. Built by the North London Railway, a lot of today's Overground runs over routes that once led here, and that's especially true for the Windrush line on the Kingsland Viaduct. Despite a strong start in life, Broad Street and the route heading into it suffered in the earlier 20th century under competition from new modes of transport like buses and the tube. This is the site of another former Shoreditch station, which closed in the early 1940s, not helped by the bomb damage from the Blitz. Broad Street itself lasted until 1986, when the station shut down, the area was redeveloped, and the viaduct was left abandoned. With only a few hundred metres between the East London line and the Kingsland Viaduct, all that they really needed to do was bridge the gap. Which they did. After another 3 years closure, the East London line reopened as part of the Overground, with a brand new station here at Shoreditch High Street, neatly avoiding the curse that had plagued the previous two stations, simply called Shoreditch. The box structure is intended to allow for future development on top of the station building, if anybody wants to do that anytime. Hoxton is the first station on today's journey actually on the old viaduct, although the station itself is newly built, if 16 years is new. If it was a person, it would be getting its GCSE results about now, so good luck, I guess. I said nothing remained of Broad Street Station, but here's something that does. A memorial commemorating the workers of the North London Railway who lost their lives in the First World War. It used to sit at the terminus, and now it's here at Hoxton. Haggerston is not a new station, although it might as well be. The original closed down in the 1940s, with this building being built specifically for the Overground. The mural inside is a tribute to 17th century astronomer Edmund Halley, born locally, who would lend his name to a comet, amongst other things. I'm not sure the connection is entirely appropriate. The thing about comets is, they have terrible headway. The next time Halley's comet is due to pass by Earth is 2061. Fortunately, the Windrush line is about 10 million times more frequent. From here, at Dalston Junction to Surrey Quays, you get a train every few minutes, even off-peak. This is the terminus for trains from New Cross and Clapham Junction and Battersea Park, but we don't talk about that. But Crystal Palace and West Croydon trains keep going for another 2 stops. Back in the Broad Street days, there was a curve of track heading east towards Poplar and the East India Docks. Now, it's a lovely community garden. The westward curve was restored to run parallel with today's Mildmay line. You can see Dalston Kingsland Station as you come out of this tunnel. The link was completed in 2011, allowing trains to run on to Canonbury and finally Highbury and Islington. Here we are then at the end of the line. Change here for Victoria, Mildmay and National Rail services. I hope you've enjoyed the journey. The Windrush has certainly been on a few of them over the years, with all sorts of calamities, failures and struggles along the way. But now look at it. Let it be a lesson to you. If at first you don't succeed, maybe in 150 years or so, you'll get a new lease of life as a vital part of a cross-London orbital rail. I'm not sure what I'm getting at there. Bye! Thank you very much for joining me on this episode on the Windrush line, formerly known as the East London line. This particular train did not run on that line, but it's an open heritage train, so of course I'm going to go and have a sit. That is the end of the current series of Journey of the Month. I don't know exactly what we've got coming up, but I'm sure we'll still be looking behind the scenes of London's transport network.